House of Tax Policy will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Neely,
Here.
Representatives Farhat,
Here.
Brixey,
Here.
Carter,
Here.
Witset,
Here.
Grant,
Here.
Price,
Yes.
Van Workum,
Here.
Markkinen, Outman, Tisdale, Hoadley.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Vice Chair Farhat makes a motion to adopt minutes from the November 1st, 2023 meeting. Without objection, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony on HB 4691 and testimony and vote on SB 175, and with a vote on substitute H1 to SB 175. We will now take up testimony and vote on Senate Bill 175. Now we will have Nick Cook to come up. And Alvin Hahn, City Assistant, City of Detroit, to come up with them. You gentlemen can start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman Neely, members of the Tax Policy Committee. I am Nick Cook. I'm Chief of Staff for Senator Santana. She apologizes that she can't be here today. She's in appropriations or currently leaving caucus. So she apologizes she couldn't be here today. Senate Bill 175 came to us from the City of Detroit. What was happening many times in the City of Detroit, properties were being transferred cash on hand without the property tax transfer affidavit being filed. What this was doing was allowing flippers to update the house without having to pay the increased property tax. Once the property was transferred to the new owner, the property tax transfer affidavit would be filed, thus causing an uncapping. The city assessor, which can go into more detail about this, would then try to figure out who was supposed to be paying these back taxes. And a lot of times it would be a lien on the property. So what we're doing in this bill is if you file your principal residence exemption, even if you forget to file the property tax affidavit, it'll still be only the $200, maximum of $200 penalty for those that have the principal residence exemption. For those that are flipping the property and are bad actors, we are now capping that in the sub at $4,000. So you'll be charged $5 a day. You do the math, it'll get you about $1,800 for the first year, and then the second it'll be capped at $4,000. So hopefully we're trying to stop the bad actors that aren't filing this property tax transfer affidavit, and then allowing those that genuinely forget to file it because that's their home, they didn't know better, that they are not penalized and still capped at the $200 penalty. I will turn it over to Mr. Alvin Horn, the city assessor for the City of Detroit, to kind of explain this in further detail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alvin Horn, Deputy CFO and Assessor for Detroit. And first of all, let me start by saying we would prefer everyone filed their property transfer affidavit. We definitely don't want to be in this position. But this is directed at people who are speculators, people who have no intention of filing their property transfer affidavit. They either acquire the property, they rent it until the taxes catch up, and they walk away from it. Or they sell it to someone who's unsuspecting. They did not know that there was a lien against the property. They did not know that a property transfer affidavit had been filed. So a unsuspecting new property owner who thinks they've bought their dream house is suddenly faced with several years of back taxes that they weren't prepared to pay because the assessor suddenly discovered that 3-4 years ago the property should have uncapped. And we're put in the unenviable position of uncapping a tax bill for a new owner who had no idea that they were about to be put in that position of paying those back taxes. So this is directed at people who have no intention of following the law. These are speculators who have no qualms about either walking away from their responsibility or they consider the $200 a inconvenience and it doesn't deter them from doing anything. Those owner-occupants, those people who actually own their property and live in it, they'll be held harmless. There is no intention of causing them any undue stress or hardship. This is directed at people who knowingly and willingly avoid filing a property transfer affidavit. They do not file deeds. They don't file PTAs. We don't know that that property transferred until a new owner walks into our office and does what they're supposed to do. And then suddenly we are faced with the untenable position of either walking away from that uncapping, which is actually illegal, or forcing a new property owner to pay taxes that they really shouldn't have to bear. So this is directed at flippers. This is directed at people who have no intention of following the law, not those who buy a property and honestly intend to live in it. They'll be held harmless. So thank you, ma'am.
All right, we have a question, Rep. Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Neely. I'm struggling with how does a property transfer that has a tax lien on it?
Through the chair, a property, in a perfect situation, they shouldn't. What tends to happen, because most transfers in Detroit are either land contracts or quitclaim deeds. So someone will buy the property not knowing that they need to check with the county treasurer, or they need to check with the circuit court or the county clerk to see if there's any types of liens against that property. It's just the reality of Detroit right now. Most transfers are your quitclaim deeds or their land contracts. And people are, if you're buying a house for the first time and you don't have someone who can tell you the steps to take, then you're in the position of depending on the person you're buying that property from for being honest. Most of the time they are, but sometimes they're not.
And where does the title company come in on this?
Unfortunately, when it comes to a quitclaim deed or a land contract, 99 out of 100 times the title company's not involved.
And this isn't just a city of Detroit problem, sir. Upon introducing this bill, we thought this was a city of Detroit issue. But you'll hear from the Ingham County Treasurer, and this is an issue in Ingham County. We heard from the assessor's office in Ottawa County. It's an issue over there. It's everywhere. So really what we're trying to do is allow people that want to buy a property and make an honest mistake, holding them harmless, and then getting those that are trying to take advantage of people and of our tax structure, penalizing them.
So it's a combination of a non-traditional sale with an uninformed buyer and a malevolent seller. Again, all outside of what it would be the traditional sales process.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Rep. Britsky.
Thank you, Chair Neely. So if you're holding the person harmless who's buying the property, then aren't you opening it up for additional deals to be made where, okay, these taxes are out there? Like if they're doing it because they know that it's going to get uncapped and they're trying to avoid it, and they make a deal with the person on the land contract, hey, you buy this on land contract and claim you didn't know anything about it, and then you won't have to pay it. And they'll be in an LLC and they'll shut it down and just start a new LLC.
Through the chair. Ma'am, you're right. That does happen. Every time we think we've put an end to one particular scheme, someone figures out another way to game the system. That does happen, particularly with LLCs, particularly with land contracts. What we do is, one thing we started doing in Detroit is trying to educate people about what the pitfalls are of buying a house under untraditional methods, and we certainly can do a better job, and we'll certainly step up those activities. Our intention is not to harm someone who unknowingly or unwittingly found themselves in this situation. We're taking every effort to assure that someone who honestly bought a house and through no fault of their own found themselves in these circumstances, not to hold that person harmless. But we're also doing our due diligence to make sure that's what happened, This isn't someone who was part of a scheme, that someone who want to game the system found a compadre, paid them a couple of bucks, and got them to be a part of it. So we're doing our due diligence. We're also trying to educate people of the pitfalls, but there's no perfect system. This is an attempt to close one loophole. And I don't doubt for a second someone will figure out another loophole.
Is there any legislation needed around land contracts to require a title search before they're filed with the deeds office?
There are, if you don't mind me speaking, there are efforts, different parties who are trying to address that very question. I don't think we've come up with something that we can present to this honorable body yet. There's just a lot of thoughts on how we can best address some of the problems that we face, but also being mindful that most land contracts are honest. Most of them are legitimate. You don't want to hurt the honest people by trying to do something to get those 2 out of 10 bad actors. So it's that thought's out there, ma'am. We're just not sure what the best tact is yet.
And through the chair, ma'am, the other issue is quitclaim deeds. There are legitimate reasons for quitclaim deeds. However, you do have bad actors out there that are using quitclaim deeds. So there are loopholes. This is just closing one of those loopholes.
Is this scheme, though, more often a quitclaim deed or more often a land contract?
Through the chair, more often a quitclaim deed, ma'am. But we are seeing an increased use of land contracts.
And that's harder because if somebody dies, or if you're getting divorced, that's a very common, or if somebody's given the house to their kid, Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much for testifying.
Thank
If
you,
we
Madam
have any
Chair.
more questions, we'll call you back up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. You cancel. All right, moving along. We have to support the bill that would like to speak, Alan Fox from Ingram County Treasurer. Welcome to Tax Policy.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Neely and members of the committee. My name is Alan Fox. I'm the Ingham County Treasurer. I'm speaking on behalf of the Michigan Association of County Treasurers, which has been looking at this legislation. I won't repeat what the previous gentlemen have said. They spoke very clearly about what the issue is that the bill attempts to address. And as Mr. Cook said, it's a problem in Ingham County, it's a problem in Ottawa County, it's a problem across the state. Michigan does not require property registration. That means that the property transfer affidavit is often the only evidence or the major evidence that a local assessor has that a property has changed hands. And if that's not filed, there's just no paper record required that allows a local official to follow up and to assess the proper taxes and even to bill the proper person. We county treasurers see all of this happening in the foreclosure process. And we do our very best in Ingham County and in every other county I know of to correct these when they threaten foreclosure, but we can't catch every one of them, and that's an ongoing problem. We put a lot of resources into it. So that said, the issue that the county treasurers have with this legislation is that it requires county treasurers to be the body that collects these taxes that are and fees and penalties that are not paid by previous owners of a property, and that's something that's completely outside of what we are able to do. We deal with liens against the property, but in a situation where there's no lien against the property, we've got no access to data, no good way of tracking down who should have filed an affidavit and billing them, and more importantly, we have no way to compel anybody to pay because it's a personal lien. We can't take property away. That foreclosure is in the end the strongest tool that treasurers have. We try not to exercise it but the threat of it certainly is a factor in getting people to follow the law. The sponsor of the legislation has agreed to discuss with us some changes in the language. I understand there's a desire to report the bill out and to come up with a substitute on the floor. We'll work with the sponsor, with the State Department of Treasury, and with others diligently to ensure that however this is done, it can be properly enforced and can work the way it's intended to work. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one question. Representative Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Neely. So, similar to Detroit, is this a problem that's arising out of land contracts?
We see a lot of land contracts. We see a lot of memoranda of land contracts where that's the only record of a property transfer, but it's also a quitclaim deed problem. And as the previous gentleman said, these are documents that do not go through title companies. If there's a warranty deed, the warranty deed is submitted to the treasurer's office in every county in the state, and we affirm that there are no delinquent taxes. Anything else just gets filed with the Register of Deeds, and the Register of Deeds position and situation by law is that they're recording a deed. They are not exercising any judgment about the validity of it, about whether taxes have been properly paid, and so forth.
Because you couldn't get traditional mortgage financing without a clear title, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And then in this instance, who's coming forward? Is anyone ever coming forward to claim this as their homestead property?
People who have quitclaim deeds and land contracts may claim, by law, the homestead. And most do. As the gentleman before me said, most people do follow the process properly. But there are a number of cases where that doesn't happen, and there are no existing tools.
So when they come forward on their homestead claim, then you know the property has changed hands.
And that's correct. And what the legislation, as I understand it, attempts to do is to say that in that case, the problem is not the new buyer or new land contract buyer. They've filed all the paperwork. The problem is to go back to that previous owner who, before selling the property, did not record any of the proper documents. How do you collect from them? They no longer have an interest in the property, so it's not appropriate to attach a lien to the property. How do you reach the people who are no longer legally connected to the property? That's the real question that this attempts to address. And in the only comparable situation, which is PRE, principal residence exemption denials that affect previous owners, it's state treasury that's designated as the body to find the previous owners and collect from them. I'd suggest that's a place to look. I know from talking with Treasury, they feel they need some time to evaluate how that would work, what sorts of resources are needed. I'll let them speak for themselves if they want, but the parallel circumstance is PRE denials on previous owners, and that's done by state treasury.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony today. We'll read in a few cards supporting the bill, neutral to the bill, is Peter Moran from the Department of Treasury. Also support the bill, but not wishing to speak is Michigan Accessory Association. Now, Rep. Fairhart offers a substitute H1 to Senate Bill 175.
I can speak to the substitute. The change would allow in lieu of the original language, which double the amount of taxes as a fee for all other property, the substitute would instead set the cap for the fee to a flat $4,000, similar to how the Chief of Staff, Nick Cook, just described. So the substitute will keep it in line with what we just heard.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Neely?
Yes.
Representatives Farhat?
Yes.
Rixey?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Witset?
Yeah.
Grant?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Van Workum?
No.
Markkinen? Outman?
No.
Tisdale?
No.
Hoadley?
No.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 4 nays, and 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Now Representative Price makes a motion to report Senate Bill 175. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Neely?
Yes.
Representatives Farhat?
Yes.
Rixey?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Witset?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Van Workum?
No.
Markkinen? Oh, sorry. Outman?
No.
Tisdale?
No.
Hoadley?
No.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 4 nays, 0 pass. SB 175's report recommendation, substitute H1.
Thank you. Now we will take up testimony on House Bill 4961. And we also have Chris Miller, who will be joining them at the table. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I will need about 47 minutes to testify. Yes. I'm here to talk about House Bill 4691, which is legislation. I got to give credit where credit's due. This was a bill that former Representative Brown Akali worked on last term, and we have taken the baton to continue this work. So this legislation, I'm going to try to explain it in as simple terms as possible. This will be a truly innovative piece of policy that we can implement right here in the state of Michigan. It will provide a first-in-the-nation state income tax credit for Michigan residents who decide to invest in Michigan businesses. So, in plain speak, this is what the legislation would do. I'm going to use an example. Let's say my neighbor, Brianna, wants to start a coffee shop. And she comes to me as her neighbor and friend, and she says, Abe, I'm really interested in starting this coffee shop. Are you willing to support my business efforts? And we come to an agreement, and I say, I'll offer her a $10,000 investment for her business in exchange for some equity into that business. And then she's successful. So now I'm someone that is invested in seeing my neighbor become an entrepreneur, allowing her to start a small business. But this legislation would then incentivize me even further. So the way it would work is you get 50% up to $3,000 in a state income tax credit for any investment you make for a Michigan business. So if I invested 10 grand into this coffee shop, we're going to call it Brianna's Coffee Shop, then I can claim up to $3,000 for my income tax credit for up to 10 years after I actually make this investment, if there's any income liability in that process. So this is an incredible opportunity for us to allow small businesses to accelerate their investment. It increases the opportunity for folks in our communities to put skin in the game while also supporting their actual communities. And I just want to sort of explain the history of these types of investments. So from 1933 until 2012, we passed what's called the Jobs Act. It was federal legislation that at one point effectively made it illegal or nearly impossible for citizens to make direct legal investments in businesses. So after the SEC was established during the Great Depression, the SEC divided the investment world into two chunks. We had what was called an accredited investor, which oftentimes are usually the very wealthy people with lots of assets. And then there was non-accredited investors, which are 90% of America. And this problem persists today. In fact, even to this point, from when this law was introduced till now, over 90% of Americans would be classified as non-accredited investors. So the Jobs Act really opened up the door for these types of investments. I'm sure many of you have heard of websites like Kickstarter, So the way Kickstarter works is if someone has an idea, they can make the pitch on that website, and then you make an investment. Sometimes they'll offer you, if it's a product or a service, they say you get access to that product or that service once it comes to fruition, or it's just you want to choose to invest in that idea. So this legislation aims to take that concept and really localize it right here in Michigan. If any of you would want to help invest in a small business in your community, so long as it's not a family member, then you would be able to qualify for this tax credit. And the tax credit, like I said, lasts up to 10 years after you make that initial investment. Say you don't have as much tax liability the year you invested, but somewhere down the line, you do have a higher tax liability and you want to be able to write off that $3,000, you could be able to claim that as a credit. And this would be capped at $3,000 or up to 50%, whichever is lower in that instance. So if you invested, say, $2,000, you'd be able to get $1,000 as a tax credit. If you invested $4,000, you'd be able to get $2,000, so on and so forth. So this is one of the best ways. I know we've talked a lot this term about allowing our state to spur small business growth, to incentivize young entrepreneurs and old entrepreneurs alike to invest in their communities. And this legislation would actually set that up. You know, for those of us that can't access the SOAR Fund or Make It in Michigan or whatever we may call it now, this is an opportunity for local mom and pop shops, young folks, and anyone interested in establishing business here to be able to crowdsource from their network of individuals. And there's a skin in the game as well as an incentive for folks to do that as well. So I did my absolute best to try to explain this. I'm not done with my coffee, but I'm happy to take any questions, Madam Chair, or I can let Chris Miller present and then we can go over any questions. So I'll leave it to you.
We'll let Chris go ahead and present, and then we'll take questions after everyone's done.
Thank you, Chair Neely. Thank you, Chair Neely. Thank you for Katie for turning on the button, and members of the committee. So I'm here today in my role of as board chair of the National Coalition for Community Capital, which is a 501c3, which was established in 2017 to really advance the cause of community capital. And by community capital, we refer to folks broadly in the community making direct investments into business in the community. And we were really jet propelled by the passage of the Jobs Act. And actually, Michigan was one of the first states, while we waited for the Jobs Act to be enacted, to pass our own investment crowdfunding bill. That was the MILE Act, passed in 2013. And Michigan was the fourth state to get that exemption. 36 other states followed our lead largely because we wrote a really good bill, and some of your predecessors voted for that, so thanks for that. We, however, have discovered as we've worked in this space that it's difficult to change a paradigm. And so attorneys, investment advisors, bankers, CPAs who haven't worked in the field were trained in, no, you don't let a lot of people in the investment. It causes problems and there are challenges. And so we've had to really go through a pretty significant paradigm shift. And the reason for this legislation is that we want to incentivize folks to start doing this kind of investing in their own communities, which is legal, but is not as easy as the kind of investing that we've historically been doing. So I did a couple of pass outs here, and I wanted to note a couple of things specifically about the bill. So one pass out is a synopsis of a study that was done in Nova Scotia. So in Canada, they have some structures that are a little different than we have in the U.S. And in 1999 in Nova Scotia, they set up an investment vehicle that allowed Nova Scotians to invest in a fund which turned around and invested in the community. And in 2019, there was a formal study of that fund done. And I got a hold of that white paper in 2020 and really used it, especially in our discussions with Treasury, to demonstrate that this was a good idea and it was sound economics. So I just want to go through really quickly the highlights of that fund. So they offer about a 30% tax credit for Nova Scotians who invest in the fund. And in 2019, $2 million of investment came into the fund from just regular folks like us in Nova Scotia. That cost the province $700,000 in tax credits. They took that $2 million and invested it into 116 small businesses, and those businesses created 1,200 FTEs. Those FTEs were paid $52 million in wages and salaries. And at the end of the day, the province generated an additional $25 million in taxes. Now, they had to pay for the tax credit, so the net benefit was just over $24 million in taxes. I would also note, I think we have some of my friends from the MEDC here, the efficacy of this program as a jobs creation program. So at $700,000 for 1,200 FTEs, that's under $600 per job to create a job. Don't think we've got anything that's quite that efficient anyplace else. So a really positive piece. So the program is efficient at creating jobs, retaining capital, recirculating capital, and building wealth. One of the things that we're seeing a lot today is a call for community wealth building. Here's a report I just got from the Democracy Collaborative, which is actually a really great organization doing terrific work nationally. And it is all about using tools to build community wealth. Interestingly, they don't have very much in here about this kind of investing that we're talking about because it is, again, so new. But I think it demonstrates that one of the things we've sort of figured out in the last few years is that we need to find a way to strengthen our local economies. They're having a tough time for a variety of reasons, and this is a method to do that. One of the other really interesting pieces that is evolving in this is when we're seeing community investing, we're also seeing a really strong interest by philanthropy to support those kinds of projects. And here's an article that was in Forbes magazine that describes a really interesting way that a platform is partnering with community foundations. And in that partnering, the community foundation provides a pool of capital. And when a project comes on the platform that aligns with their values, so maybe they're supporting women entrepreneurs or BIPOC entrepreneurs or inner-city businesses, when that project comes up on that platform, the philanthropic money comes in as seed money, sometimes at the front end of the deal, or more often as match money. Once the community has made investments in it, then the philanthropic money comes in as well. So we're seeing some really interesting ways that philanthropy, which is really interested right now in doing impact investing, has a mechanism and a vehicle to do it. And finally, the last thing that I wanted to reference was what happens when a community invests in a small business. So I don't know if you follow the venture capital world, but last year in 2022, venture capitalists gave less than 2% of their money to women founders. I can't imagine a world where that makes any sense. And that's after a couple of years ago, the VC community said, we're going to do a better job of that. And they briefly bumped up over to 2%. We're back under 2% last year. In contrast, there's a platform called Honeycomb Credit, and you have a handout on this as well. Honeycomb Credit really has focused on those places where CDFIs operate, so those underserved entrepreneurs that have trouble being bankable. And they've had a stunning success over the past 7 years at doing that. So most recently, this year, over 72% of their businesses had a women owner, and 59% had a BIPOC owner. 12% were veteran-owned. So what we're seeing with this kind of investment is that those people that are receiving the investment, those businesses that are starting, look more like we do. So it's not just wealthy white men that are getting funded, it's community members as a whole. And we really believe this legislation is going to accelerate this. It's going to put Michigan in the lead in a really important way. We actually have a number of states that have come to us because this got some attention last year. As the representative noted, this was introduced last year by Representative Colley, who was my rep there in Adrian, where I'm from. And we got national attention there. A number of states reached out to us and said, hey, we're interested in this. So we've been putting them on hold. And we really want Michigan to cross the finish line first. So thank you very much. Happy to respond to any questions.
We do have a few questions. We will start out with Representative Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Neely. Real quickly, can you describe how these transfers of equity are made in closely held businesses, how they're documented, and what proof is needed in order to secure the tax credit?
So it is, to begin with, it's not necessarily equity. These could be equity or debt investments on the part of the investor. It's really up to the specific project. And essentially, it's a very simple process. So in order to do this, make this investment, an investor will have to go on one of about 60 platforms right now that exist across the country. All of those platforms are in compliant with federal securities laws, and they will make that investment. It produces a document which verifies where this investment came from, where the person lived, and the amount of the investment. So the investor then would take that information and submit it to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They will verify that that is a Michigan citizen and that the business that they're investing in it meets the IRS criteria as a Michigan business. And at that point, the tax credit comes into force. And I should also point out that this only happens after the raise is successful and the business is underway. So if the business does not secure the funds are returned to the investor, no tax credits involved.
So it could be a loan and you get a 50% tax credit up to $3,000 on a loan that could be generating income monthly.
That's correct. So it would be if you weren't doing an equity investment that necessarily had a return on investment, but you were loaning money, you would receive the return on investment, whatever the terms of the loan dictated, as well as the state of Michigan income tax credit. Thank you. You're welcome.
Representative Britsky.
So a rich person can give money to aspiring business person and get a tax credit for it and also get their money back with interest.
Any investor can do that. Again, the maximum amount of investment on an annual basis that is eligible for that tax credit is $6,000.
And this then impacts, so we don't have the fiscal analysis yet. Am I correct? Unless that came in, right?
Came in recently.
It did come in?
It doesn't know the exact revenue amount there should be printed.
You should talk into the microphone so they can hear you. For
permission to do that.
Oh. Okay. So then this impacts the school aid fund.
So, Representative, if we use the Nova Scotia model as an example, Nova Scotians invested, as Mr. Miller referenced, in 2019, you're looking at $2 million to 116 businesses, and that created 1,200 jobs.
Okay.
And I believe the total salaries for those people was around 54 or 24 million?
54 million.
$54 million. So, so that $2 million tax credit, it resulted in a $24 million tax revenue for that province. Now, obviously, Michigan's tax rate is different, but if we're looking at the types of communities that this would benefit, I mean, it's communities like mine, communities like Flint and Grand Rapids, where you have people that may not have access to banks or bank loans and things of that nature. So if I'm able to crowdsource financing for my business through my network of friends, my network of community members, that could overall be a net positive, because the people that are investing in the business likely have some geographic vicinity in terms of where they stay. They're close enough to that business where they may want to see that business succeed. So overall, what we are expecting to see is these investors have skin in the game. This is not intended for wealthy people to just carte blanche give away all their money. There are far more lucrative ways for really wealthy people to move their money around. This is not intended to do that. This is more so for folks like us, maybe it's a school teacher, maybe it's someone that works as a journeyman, who may have some access to excess capital or some money in the bank, that rather than let it sit there, I can invest $2,000 in a business, and then I have helped the business with sourcing their capital, but it also incentivizes me further because now I can actually get a tax credit in that process as well. So it's really a way to make sure that Michigan residents are investing in Michigan businesses. This is a far better incentive than, say, folks that are going to put their money into the stock market, because this generates real impacts for communities and businesses across the state. So can we calculate what the fiscal impact would be on the actual tax credits relative to what the overall benefit would be? I think it's too soon to tell, but just using the model that we saw in Canada, we have an opportunity to do something novel here in Michigan.
Yes, but the question that I asked was, it impacts the school aid fund. So 25% of the income tax revenue is earmarked to the school aid fund.
Yes.
So 25% of the tax credit is being taken then out of the school aid fund.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Ripsey. Now we have Representative Van Workum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the committee members know, we've heard a lot of bills come before the committee that's basically using the tax code to incentivize behavior. So I guess my question is for the representative. Do you believe that lower taxes encourages investment and growth? And from your testimony right there, that this would rise all tides in creating more jobs, which creates more taxpayer dollars?
I believe this is an effective way to incentivize Michiganders to invest in Michigan businesses.
And the end result would be?
More jobs in Michigan.
By lowering the tax code?
Offering an incentive for people to invest in small businesses.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And thank you guys for coming in and testifying this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have here wishes to speak in support of the bill is Jenna Jordan. Good morning and welcome, or good afternoon and welcome to Tax Policy.
Good afternoon, Chair Neely and members of the committee. My name is Jeananne Jondi, and I am the Regional Economic Innovation Coordinator at Michigan State University's Economic Development Administration University Center, so EDA University Center. We look to, as an EDA University Center, to support new innovative tools, models, policies, and programs across the state in Michigan, specifically for distressed regions in the state. I had met Chris as an innovation fellow in the program and learned more about community capital. One of the two major things that we keep hearing from communities across the state is capacity. There are issues with capacity and access to capital. Many communities struggle with the capacity on staff to access the capital that's there, where you might find larger companies and corporations that they have access to. This is a way to provide community that access to capital. It engages the community in creates social fabric. So when I invest in a local business, I'm more likely, one of the examples was given as a cafe. I'm more likely now to bring my book club to that cafe and support that local business, right? So it recirculates capital within that community. And one of the things that we see in distressed communities is a lot of that wealth leaves the communities. So this is another innovative way of creating access and keeping the capital within those communities so that individuals and communities together can build that wealth. And it also creates jobs. And this is something, that I had read a report by Brookings. And one of the things that they stated as one of the indicators was self-employment opportunities. And to be able to support our local businesses and stabilize the local community, local businesses, you are actually creating stability within these local communities. So instead of having, as we're creating jobs and income where people can live off, we're not going to see an out-migration, brain drain in some of the communities, but rather we're going to see people that are going to be more dedicated to those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions. Thank you today. Oh, Rep. Rooksett.
I guess this is more so for the bill sponsor. One thing, does this assist with people who are along the lines that, because within the community, people are not able to access traditional banks or credit unions, and they do not have the credit scores, they do not have the credit built. Will this more so assist those type of people?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, just to talk through why this is so important, I have some quick statistics, right? We see a lot of bank consolidation, right? 2/3 of all banks since the 1980s have closed. We had 18,084 and only 5,000 in 2021. So to your point, Rep. Whitsett, we are seeing a lot of these banks closing, and particularly in communities like where you and I represent, it's difficult to access some of this capital for a multitude of reasons. This would be another avenue for people to do that. Sometimes their credit score may not show it in terms of the ability to invest, but we have people in our community that believe in some of the businesses and some of the vision of our budding entrepreneurs. This would give them that opportunity without having to go take a traditional bank loan that they may not be able to qualify for.
One last thing. We always bring things before this committee where we love to give tax breaks to corporations. For once, let's give tax breaks to our own people who are actually in our community.
Amen.
All right, thank you. Seeing there's no other questions, thank you guys for coming in today. We appreciate you. We're going to read in some cards here. Wishing not to speak but support the bill is Mike Johnson from MMA. Also, not wanting to speak but support the bill is Michigan Municipality League. Also supporting the bill but do not wish to speak is Small Business Association of Michigan. And also not willing to speak but opposes the bill is Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Now we have a Representative Whitsett makes a motion to excuse all absent members, please forgive me, and without any objection. Absent members are excused. There being no more business before this committee, this committee is adjourned.